Hi, in this video I'm just going to go over a couple of questions from Game 4 from Prep Test 58. So first I'll set it up. We've got a minimum of 3 courses from out of 7. So minimum of 3, we could have more. And then our total is 7, and we've got H, L, M, P, S, T, and W. So yeah, minimum 3 in means a maximum of 4 out. All right, if we have H, then we can't have stats or music. So if we have stats or music, we can't have H. If music is taken, then we can't have physics or theater. So if physics or theater is taken, then music isn't taken. If writing is taken, then we don't have physics and we don't have stats. If we have physics or stats, then no writing. Okay, so a pattern that we see here is that any player being in seems to push other players out. So it's actually probably going to be pretty easy for us to reach our maximum out, and actually kind of tricky to get the minimum of 3 in. So let's look at the questions. Question 22. The student must take one or the other or both of one of these. One or the other or both. So really what that's saying to me is they have to take at least one. They could take both, but they have to take at least one. So they can't have both of these out. They have to have at least one of them in. And when I'm thinking about the pattern that I'm seeing in this game of all of the triggers are a player being in and all of the consequences are other players being out, I'm thinking it's actually going to be kind of difficult for me to get those 3 in because I keep having to put so many players out. So I'm going to look at which players, when they're in, put the fewest players out, and therefore are going to be ones that I would actually want to have in more often so that I'm not worried about going over my maximum out. Okay, so this requires a bit of like a higher level of thinking to get this question in like an efficient way. You kind of have to be seeing that pattern. Another way would be if you just understand the question as they must take at least one of these 2. You can look at it as a must be true question, and you can do process of elimination by falsifying. It's process of elimination. So how do we do that? We do process of elimination. We just go through the answer choices one by one. And to falsify, to show that it doesn't actually have to be true, we would show that we don't have to have at least one of them in. We could have both of them out. So we don't actually have to have, either history or statistics or both in. We could have the student take neither of them. So if we put both history and stats out, let's see if we can make that work. If we can, then we can eliminate A. So history and stats both out. Okay, how are we going to fill these spots then? So if we put music in, then we would have physics and theater out. And then everything else would have to be in. So what else is left? There's linguistics, which, is wild. So it doesn't have any consequences. We like that. And then the other one we would have in would be W. Yeah, and that's allowed, right? So we could have M, L, and W because W puts P and S out. Great, they're already out. L doesn't force anybody to be out. M being in forces H out, and P and T out, but that's fine. We've hit our maximum, but that's okay. We haven't gone over it, and we've hit the minimum, which we need to. So because this is acceptable, that means that we don't have to have H or S or both of them in. So since we falsified this as a must be true statement, it's not the correct answer for this must be true question. Now for B, let's look at that one. What if we put both linguistics and theater out? Now I'm thinking, putting linguistics out is kind of risky, I guess, is sort of the way I'm thinking about it, because linguistics is our wild card, you know, it's not going to have any impact. I can put it in without having to put players out, and I like that. So based on that high level thinking, I think this actually has a really good chance of being the correct answer, because I think I'm probably going to have linguistics in, and if I have linguistics out, then the other player that I have to have in would be one that doesn't push a lot of players out. So theater looks like a great candidate for that, because theater only pushes one player out, whereas physics pushes music and writing out. Statistics pushes history and writing out. Music pushes history, physics, and theater out. So music actually is kind of a problematic player, right? So putting music in, we have to put 3 players out. That's pretty intense. History, would have to put 2 players out. So theater is kind of unusual compared to the other players that are triggers, because if we put theater in, we only have to put 1 player out, and the player we're putting out is music, which is actually quite problematic if we put it in. So I'm thinking B is going to be the correct answer because of that sort of higher level pattern recognition in this game, where linguistics is wild, doesn't push anybody out, and theater only pushes 1 player out, and the player it pushes out is kind of like a troublemaker in my mind. All right, so let's see if that way of thinking is correct using our falsification method. So if we put both linguistics and theater out, are we going to be able to create an acceptable scenario? So let's try. We've only got 2 out positions available, so we certainly can't put music in, because putting music in is going to fill those 2 positions, and then we don't have any wild cards left, so every other one is going to move players out. So I would have music out, and then I would look for maybe players that are kind of compatible in some way, but even so, we're going to run into problems, because, so let's say we put H in, then, okay, H is in, but then S is out, and then what are my remaining players? I have P. If I put P in, then W has to be out, and I'm going over my maximum. Okay, so that's not going to work, right? Is there any combination that would actually work where we have L and T out? Yeah, we're really not going to be able to make that work. So we can't put both P and M in, so at least one of those 2 is going to be out. We can't put both S and W in, so at least one of those guys is going to have to be out. We can't put both H and S in, so we're going to have a spot for that. You know, maybe if we have, if we have W, H, maybe it starts to seem like it could work, but then what happens there? Okay, W is in, that means P and S are out. And then if H is also in, then M has to be out, and we're going over the maximum again. So there's actually no way to make that work. There's just no way that we're going to be able to create a scenario where we don't have L and we don't have T. So our conclusion is that the student has to take linguistics, theater, or both in order for it to work. Okay. So tricky question. Hopefully that falsification method makes sense. Hopefully also that sort of higher level pattern recognition is helpful and something that you can kind of look out for. This is a kind of a unique game in that we do have, you know, for any one player that is in, it seems like we're going to have at least one player out. It can be super helpful if you note that to sort of add up how many players have to be out if one player is in, right? So if H is in, we have 2 players out. If L is in, that's our wild card, so we love L. If M is in, then 1, 2, 3 players are out. For P, M and W have to be out, that's 2. For S, W and H have to be out, that's 2. For T, just M has to be out, so that's 1. And for W, P and S have to be out, so that's 2. Hope that helps for question 22. The next one is a substitution question. I will, actually I'll do that one right now. It's kind of dealing with that music rule. I apologize if the music in the background is distracting. My housemate is a piano teacher and she has a student here, so that's why. Okay. Okay, so question 23. Which one of the following is substituted? So substitution question. And what's the rule that we're subbing? It's this music rule, right? So music is an interesting one, right? What do we know about music? Generally, when we know if music is in, then P is out, T is out, and from the contrapositive over here, we also know that H is out. So if we have music, then the only other players that we could have with music are L, S, and W. So we're definitely going to have L. The reason we have to have L is because we can't have both S and W. If we have W, we can't have S. If we have S, we can't have W. So this is what would happen if we have music, okay? The reason I note this is because if I say this about music, if I say that if we have music, then the only players we could have with music are linguistics, stats, and writing, then that's going to tell me I can't have physics and theater. So it sort of allows me to derive the original rule. It's like I can go back and forth between this inference that I got from the original rule and the original rule. So like B would work. The only ones eligible to be taken with music. I care about music because it's the one that's the most restricted by this rule. C, where it talks about those are the only ones eligible to be taken with physics, is actually incorrect. Physics is not that restricted. So if I have physics, I can't have music and I can't have writing, but I could have L, T, H, S. I have lots of options. So C actually isn't correct. And then taken together with theater, I have lots of options because the only one that can't be with theater is music. Also, focusing on physics or theater isn't very helpful because we need to have a relationship between both physics and theater and music, right? Physics and theater on one side, music on the other. Even if C and D were correct in saying that physics can't be with music or theater can't be with music, it wouldn't tell us both sides of that equation. So C and D are probably traps based on actually a misinterpretation of this original rule. A, if music is taken, then either stats or writing must also be taken. Okay, true, but doesn't include the part where we have to have linguistics plus either stats or writing. So it still leaves open an empty spot where maybe we could have physics or theater because we haven't removed them as possibilities. Whereas B removes physics and theater from having the option of being taken together with music. And then E is a misinterpretation of this rule. It is not the contrapositive, right? So the contrapositive means we have to negate that and turn it into an or. So it wouldn't be true to say that that E is going to actually cover the same ground that's covered by the contrapositive, because it would require that we know that both physics and theater are taken before we rule out music, when actually we only need to know that either physics or theater is taken in order to rule out music. So this is a lot more helpful than E is, and it's going to be more limiting to music than E is. So the only one that actually would have the same effect, the same limitations and the same allowances as the original is B. Okay. So, I mean, I kind of went from that more high level approach on this one and then went through and did a bit of process of elimination after that. So I focused on the rule, I focused on music because that's the one that's the most restricted, and I focused on what else do I know about music. Okay, so then what is left over and which one matches that and gives me the most information. You can also go about it by running through each of the answer choices and asking, does this have to be true according to the original rules? When you do that step, what you're doing is you're eliminating anything that's too restrictive. You're not necessarily going to get to the correct answer with that one step, but you should be able to eliminate some wrong answers, some things that are too restrictive. In this case, you would be able to eliminate C and D, but you would still have A, B, and E, and you would have to figure out that A and E aren't restrictive enough. So E would still allow us to take music and physics together because it only applies if both physics and theater are taken. So if we just take physics and not theater, we can ignore that rule. Whereas in the original, if we take physics, that still means we can't take music. For A, it would also allow the possibility of taking music and physics together or music and theater together, as long as we also take statistics or writing with music, right? Which isn't the case in this scenario. We absolutely can't take music with physics or music with theater. So yeah, I hope that helps. Substitution questions are notoriously difficult, and you'll see more of them for sure as you're practicing. But yeah, hopefully you can see a little bit more of that like high level deduction for this guy and high level pattern recognition. Okay, let me know if you have any more questions.